into the meeting. Just for the record, Lisa, we have Nicole Eady, Common Council member. I'm going to promote her.
Yes, I was going to say, please move her over.
Oh, hold on.
I'll mention her in the minutes, so the minute taker knows what to say about her.
Yep. We also have Diana Palladino and Ken DiRenzo are also here.
Okay, great. They don't need to be panelists. They can make public comment if they'd like.
Correct.
Okay. Hi, Nicole. Thank you for joining us.
Hi,
All right, are you ready?
how are you?
Good, thanks. Are you ready for me to start now, Brian?
Yeah, we can start. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm calling to order the Ordinance Committee special meeting on September 3rd. It is 6:04. The first piece of order, well, first I'll call the roll call. We have Nora Nojewski-Eichner here, Josh Goldstein, Jalen Seed, Johan Lopez. I'm here, and I'm not on the committee, but attending is Councilperson Nicole Eady. Our first matter of business is the public hearing to discuss and vote on the revisions to the ordinance establishing an advisory committee for the reapportionment of the Common Council voting districts. Is there anybody here who wants to speak to the
public
new
hearing.
ordinance, to the public hearing?
If anyone would like to speak on the matter that's before us as to the public hearing, please raise your hand now. No hands have been raised, Lisa.
Okay, so seeing and hearing none, we'll close the public hearing, and now we'll open the discussion to talk about said ordinance. Do you want to, Brian, just discuss the very small change that Attorney Medley wanted us to do for? It's not a substantive
Yes.
change.
Yes. So this, let me just find it real quick. Hold on.
And maybe you can post it up.
Yep.
Share your screen.
So just to set it up real quick, this can be found in section 927, subsection I, which is identified as the 2024 transition provision. So I'm just going to highlight the language. Okay. I'm going to put it up on the screen. But first I want to read it because when I put it up on the screen, we're going to lose it. So the language currently says, if the registrar fails to designate the ex officio non-voting members, the deputy registrar may serve, or the president of the council, following consultation with the chair of the political party of the registrar who does not serve or appoint a designee, shall appoint a representative. The proposed change would be, shall designate a representative of the registrar. The reason for this change is this way, the president of the Common Council can designate that representative as soon as the ordinance is effective, which would be at the September 10th meeting, which would allow Diana Palladino to immediately start serving in that capacity. So that's the reason for the change, but I will show everyone by sharing my screen.
Thank you, Brian.
So
And
as
if
you
anybody
can see,
yeah,
it's right there. That's the little point that they want to change from shall appoint a representative to what I just read you.
Great. And that's just a backstop.
Let me make that. Yeah, that's a backstop. So what I want to do is let me make that edit so everyone can see it. It'll take a moment.
So while you make that edit, I'll open up the discussion to council members to see if they have any questions or concerns about that small edit that we're making to this ordinance that we've sent to public hearing. And the plan is that assuming that everybody's in agreement, we'll vote to take it to Common Council so it can be addressed at the first council meeting. Any questions or concerns by council members on that, by committee members about that change? Seems good. Okay, so once you show it to us, Brian, then we'll vote to take it to to the council meeting, to a Common Council.
So as you can see, this is a minor change and you can see it in blue. The change now is shall designate a representative of the registrar. And that's the president of the council following consultation with the chair of the political party of the registrar who does not serve or appointed designee shall designate a representative of the registrar. Again, that will allow the president of the Common Council on September 10th, if this is moved to Common Council on September 10th, after this is approved, Diana Palladino could be designated that evening as the representative on behalf of the registrar of the Republican registrar.
Great. So I'll entertain a motion to vote to take this to Common Council on September 10th. Thank you, Nora. So all in favor of moving this to Common Council? Jalen, are you there? Jalen's yes. So that's unanimous. So that has been, that's all done. The next order of business is to accept the minutes of August 20, 2024. Does anybody have any modifications or corrections? Nora does.
Thank you, Lisa. Just very briefly on, hang on, let me pull it back up. On page 2 of the minutes under new business.
Page 2. Hold on one second, Nora. I'm putting it up on the screen
Yes.
so everyone can see. Page 2 of the minutes under.
Yep. So Ms. Njel-Siegner wanted to make it clear that second sentence, she stated this action was to guarantee that all necessary language would be covered in the charter. That's not correct. So we are saying that what I was trying to say was that this was providing language that was already covered in the charter and already required by the charter, but we thought it made sense to make sure that that same language or comparable language was also in the ordinance. So I think that's the clarification that needs to be made. We're not changing the charter.
So she stated this action was to guarantee that all necessary language was already covered in the charter.
No, to be in
Well,
conformity.
Conform it, yeah, conform it to the language.
That all necessary language conformed
With changes in the new charter.
Which require, yeah, or just with the requirements of the charter, something like that.
with requirements of the charter. Okay.
It looks as though Josh has a comment as well. Do you have any more, Nora, before we?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Great.
Okay.
So
Go ahead,
Josh, do you have a change as well?
Yeah, bottom page 3, at the end of the first sentence, it says to help mitigate issues of legal issues. It just, you can get rid of
What
the
was that?
first. Bottom of page 3, the second sentence, he stated the best part of the ordinance was that they could lobby both state and federal partners to help mitigate. It says issues of legal issues. It should just say illegal issues that may arise.
Yeah,
Just get rid of
gotcha.
the first issues. That's
Got
it.
You got it.
All right.
Great. So with those modifications, I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes as revised. Thank you, Josh. All in favor? We're all good. Jalen, you good?
I abstain.
You abstain? Okay. Oh, maybe you weren't there. Okay, so all good. That has passed. So the last order of business for this special meeting is to discuss, we're not voting on the complete streets, we're just giving everybody an update. So Josh, I'll turn it over to you to begin to talk about the changes we've made and go from there.
Sure.
Thank you.
So if everyone took a look at the complete streets ordinance that's in the packet, there are some changes. A lot of the major substance has not changed, but just to kind of, I'm going to walk through in order. I'm going to skip past the purpose for a second. If there were some stylistic changes to it, there might be some additional stylistic changes, but the substance, the crux of it is going to remain the same. You'll see the second definition where it says complete streets committee. That was already in the ordinance. We just turned it into a definition. So that the text is the same. We just moved it. You'll see on the beginning of page 2.
Oops, we lost our.
We lost the document.
Yeah. Just.
All right.
You
Sorry
can
about
keep
that.
talking. We're
Okay.
just talking about improvement
All right.
projects. So
At the beginning of page 2, there's a definition that says improvement project. You will see that that has been struck. The answer for that was we thought that might be a term that may be necessary to include. We've since confirmed with TMP and the city in general that definition is frankly encompassed by other terms already in the ordinance. So it's superfluous. There's no need to include that specific term. The next definition, mobility system, that is new. Again, the concept was something that was in the original ordinance, but the actual terminology and the definition itself, that's new. Again, safe system approach, again, another definition. There was a version of this definition in the draft that you saw a couple months ago. This has been slightly beefed up. I'm gonna skip ahead. A lot of the language insofar as the complete streets policy. So in section 1-3, that's pages 3 and 4. That is the same as the ordinance from a couple months ago. The only thing that's been changed in this section is there was a provision about how it applies to all public and private transportation projects. We learned that there is a legal issue with including that language, and so we've removed that language because it might outstretch our legal authority. Lisa and Brian, tell me if I just said that incorrectly, but that's my basic understanding.
That's how I would say it. That's how I'd, thank you.
Okay, let's talk about the design guide. So this is the bottom of page 4, heading into page 5. Design guide, the most notable thing in this section that's been added is a 30-day requirement. So there's been that the design guide should be developed and approved no later than 30 days after the date of the adoption of the ordinance. This is as a lawyer and as a human, I will tell you that nothing happens if there's no deadline. And as we do in many ordinances, putting an effective date and a deadline if there are things related to it, like guidelines, is just good drafting practice. And that's what we've done here. The rest of this section does remain the same. I want to move on to page 5, responsibilities of the complete streets coordinator. This looks different in that it is nicely spaced out. But again, this is largely the same. You'll see there's a lot of overlap here. I'm gonna skip ahead to, I want to note one thing on page, let me just make sure. Okay, bottom of page 6, 1-7. I know that I gotten some questions from members of the community and safety advocates, transportation safety advocates, about whether signal modifications are considered de minimis. We did do some research into this, and we've talked about it with TMP. And the answer to this is the classic lawyer answer to any questions, which is it depends. There are certain signal modifications that are very minor and would be considered de minimis. Obviously, ones that directly impact traffic, road conditions, those are not de minimis and therefore would fall outside the scope of this particular provision. But this language is the same or concurrent with the Connecticut Department of Transportation's language about exemptions, exceptions. So this is consistent actually with the state Department of Transportation's language on this, which is why we kept it. The exception process, as you'll see on page 7, again, is pretty much the same that we've talked about since the ordinance. The one,
Brian, if you could pull the page one more page, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm about to skip ahead on that. I just went through page 7. I'm now on page 8.
Yeah.
The only section that's new here, or at least portion of a section, is 1-8 F, which is, we included this: evaluating an exception report, the committee shall consider all relevant information, including public input, and that if they can't come to a unanimous conclusion, there must be a vote. This is a both good government, public transparency thing, but also we've been trying to sort of work through the best version of this process. Just so people understand, the Complete Streets Committee, as has been sort of designed in this ordinance, The definition is kind of morphed from its original conception to now, but it's essentially a committee of people designed to review exceptions and exemptions. And really exceptions, because exemptions really shouldn't require a whole lot of review. So it's a very narrow, they're not setting policy for the city. It's like many of the boards of commissions where they basically adjudicate and review applications. The 1.9, the only thing that I think we added to it was about identifying all transportation projects, quote, entailing third-party costs in excess of $50,000. And the rest of it, I believe, is consistent with what we did in the last iteration. And then the effective date 1/10, that is new. Again, while it is new to this ordinance, it is not new to how we draft ordinances. We just didn't have it in the last draft, and now we have it here. That's my very blow-by-blow summary of the changes in this ordinance. Obviously, I'm happy to entertain any questions. I will say, and we're not presenting this tonight, but this should be happening soon, which is the next thing there are some ordinances that already exist that are going to need to be amended in order to be consistent with the policy that we are setting in this ordinance. So that's kind of a preview of what's happening next. You guys will get that. Hopefully, I mean, we're having another meeting this month, and I believe our expectation is to go over that this month.
Yes.
So you guys will get that. Lisa and myself and people in the city and Corp Council have been looking at this to make sure that we're frankly doing this correctly. We're hoping that we are. And so you guys will be seeing that soon. But that's kind of my very quick, overview of what has happened since in the last couple of months. Do any of you have questions? Or Lisa, actually, is there anything I missed? Yeah.
Well, no, nothing that you missed. I just wanted to mention some thank yous to some of the committee members who sent in some wordsmith, which we're very grateful for, and we'll definitely be picking those up. And we will have at least 1 or 2 more meetings with TMP and DPW and maybe other organization or departments as needed to go through this draft one more time before we bring it back to you as hopefully a finished product. So if there's kind of 30,000 feet comments or questions, we'd love to hear from you guys if you have any thoughts that we need to discuss in greater detail tonight. Nora. Oh,
sorry, thanks.
Oh, there you are.
Yep, no, I'm there. And I apologize. I'm gonna go off camera just because my notes are on my phone, and so you don't see my face up close. So I really appreciate all the work on this. I think for the most part, I'd sent you a couple things that were more like, nits. I had 2 sort of, I think, more substantive questions. Starting with the easier one first, the 30 days after enactment for the Complete Streets Guide. I'm definitely all for deadlines. I think deadlines are very helpful. I wasn't sure that 30 days was quite enough, so I just was flagging that for your review with the relevant departments. And I also wanted to flag that there is public review as far as I can see for the amendments to that guide, but I don't see a public review provision for the initial guide. And I just wanted to flag that and see if that was deliberate or if that's something we should add.
No, we caught that today too. So let's think about that. Again, it's a technical document, so we're sort of struggling with this a little bit. Like we don't have public review of paving standards and things like that. So we're going to go back and think that one through a little bit. So thank you for flagging that. That's it brought it clear to our attention. We're like, wow, is this useful, or how best to do? How's that best accomplished?
Well, and that actually leads nicely into my second point, because it's a little bit tricky here. what is a technical document and what is a policy document? I'm not totally convinced that this is purely a technical document. I do think there are some pretty important, I mean, the whole reason we're doing this, right, is to enact major policy changes in terms of how we think about our roads and what's on our roads. And I do suspect that this design guide is going to have, you know, policy implications. You know, if we are spending the money to add sidewalks, we are probably going to pave fewer streets. That is probably a valid trade-off, but it is a trade-off, and there are real implications to that. And, you know, so one of the things that I, you know, had also wanted to raise was this question of whether we should have at least one, maybe two council members on the Complete Streets Committee, at least as it relates to public projects and at least as it relates to revisions of the design guide. You know, and I think my thinking on that, and again, this is not, I'm, you know, thinking this through, I'm not in any way wedded to this, but, you know, there are going to be real fiscal implications for some of these decisions, which is not a reason, it's, you know, it's a good thing, right? We have to spend our money, but I do think that having real understanding of the capital budget implications could be very helpful for the committee. It could also be helpful for the council as we need to then confront whether to approve some of these projects in the future. I think the more knowledgeable we are about the trade-offs on costs could be helpful. And, you know, I do think that particularly perhaps in the initial stages, right, as we are working through this, as we're coming to decide, you know, which streets are wide enough that they're going to require sidewalks, which streets are, you know, the right of way is simply insufficient, and are we setting policies about how we're going to handle that? You know, are we grappling with, you know, again, this sort of questions that come up in the exceptions and the exemptions, right, of how much is too much, how you know, how extra expensive is too extra expensive, how many conflicts are too many conflicts. All of that really does have some policy implication to it, at least in terms of the public projects. And again, particularly as we're getting going. And so I feel like it might be helpful to have more public voice in there. And, you know, and again, without any disrespect whatsoever to our city employees who are terrific and I think about all these things anyway. But these are implications these are things that potentially sit in realms where it might be helpful to have some of that voice. So, you know, that was my kind of overall sort of reaction in thinking about these is just, as you said, technical versus policy. It's technical, but I'm not totally sure we don't want to have some more comment on it, at least as it's getting developed and we're all getting comfortable with it.
Just for the record, Heather Dunn, Common Council member for Ordinance Committee, just appeared at 6:26, just for the record. Hi, Heather. Happy Labor Day.
Josh, do you want to go first? And then I have some feedback also for Nora on this. Yes.
I think that I agree with the thought that there should be some more public input in terms of the initial design guide. And I also think that depending on how the design guide is developed, yeah, I mean, I think there are policy choices insofar as the standards by which the departments are going to adhere to in implementing the policy as set forth in the ordinance. I think that sometimes what we talk about in terms of policy choices that you're saying are actually it's more about the execution and less about sort of what the broader policy is. And obviously that is enormously important insofar as like whether your street gets paved or not, you know, or there's a sidewalk on your street. I mean, that is the execution of the policy. That's the thing that people see. So I do think that regarding the design guide, and I think that a public process similar to the amendment process that, you know, to the design guide that we've laid out here, I think would be appropriate regarding like how, you know, take people getting enough time to look at the design guide, weighing in with any comments they may have. However, the document, as Lisa said, I mean, it's not policy documents are generally supposed to be sort of broader. They're supposed to be generally more easier to understand. As I understand design guides, having read some of them myself, they are they are more industry specific. And the idea is that it's supposed to be, as it says in the definition section, a practical working manual. So for those who are actually doing the work of like implementing the real groundwork of what we talk about in Complete Streets, that they know what to look to, the manuals to refer to, the state policy to refer to, because of course we are going to draft, I would imagine, a lot of our design guide from the state of Connecticut's Department of Transportation. So that's kind of my spiel about the design guide. Insofar as the deadline, you know, with TMP, I mean, we want to work with them and be accommodating, you know, but also I do think it's important that this, I mean, without the design guide, we can't implement the policy. And so there does need to be some sort of a temporal deadline, because while there's no doubt a lot of coordination and meetings and work that needs to be done to make sure that everyone's on the same page, there's a lot of times an impetus to kind of perseverate around how we're going to do something, and we need a deadline because we need to actually do the work that we promised our constituents that we're going to do. So that's kind of my feel about that. Insofar as additional people on the Complete Streets Committee, you know, especially council members, my primary thought on this has been that I want this process to be as free from political interference and political susceptibility as possible. My feeling on this is primarily ethical, specifically because, again, this is an exception review process, basically, and that's what this committee is. This committee isn't supposed to be setting policy for the city, but I realize that sometimes by granting or denying an exception, you are, in essence, setting some level of policy. But my feeling is, since we did look into the issue of whether we could limit the scope of who can seek an exception, and basically whether we could limit that scope to like government departments, or frankly whether we could limit the scope at all. And Brian can chime in if I'm saying this incorrectly, but the understanding is there isn't really a limit on, you know, basically whether a private developer, you know, or someone can seek an exception. And so with that in mind, my feeling was, since common council members are directly elected by the people, that putting them in a position where they're adjudicating specific applications from specific developers or something that could give ground to possible ethical issues was my reason in the drafting of this, to not include council members. Now, there is, in the way the Complete Streets Committee is formulated, there is indirect public representation through primarily the director, the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the chair of the Bike Walk Commission. I realize that that doesn't, like, there's certainly we are entrusting these people with an ethical responsibility. There's no doubt about that. But my personal feeling on this was that including people who are directly elected, I think could present some ethical challenges.
Yeah, that's pretty much where we came down to. So there was like two things. There was one, you know, these exceptions are actually technical. Like these are people who are supposed to have some subject matter expertise, and we don't, you know, as council people, we don't have subject matter expertise, generally speaking, for this role. And secondly, we were concerned, like, as in planning and zoning is a little bit protected from the electeds being able to make decisions about things that might be happening in the very neighborhoods that the council person lives in. So we felt like it's best to have it one step beyond. That's where we came out. Nor.
Thanks so much. And I appreciate, and I think those are certainly valid concerns. I want to push back a little bit on, you know, this question of sort of the elected somehow being more political or less biased, you know, than planning and zoning commission members or any other member of the public who's appointed. I think it's actually very interesting. This is a concept in Connecticut that is not a concept in other states. It's not a concept in New York. It's not a concept in Virginia. You know, it is in many other states, there is actually the converse belief that it is really important that you have public accountability for land use decisions, and having people who are directly elected be involved in those decisions. And in many states, it is that they are the final decision makers, is a really important ethical sort of consideration. I also think that truthfully, there's no reason to think that council members would be any more or less biased or subject to public pressure than, planning and zoning members or anyone else, right? I mean, corruption, unfortunately, can occur in any situation where someone in a position of power. And as I thought about it more, there is certainly some advantage to having people who are from different branches of government be engaged, because that does sort of spread the sources of input, which could be valuable. Again, it's not something I feel super strongly about. And as I said, to my mind, it makes more sense in terms of the public projects necessarily than it does the private ones. I'm mostly sort of interested in, again, input in terms of things like projects that are then going to show up on capital budget requests, and really making sure that we have sort of depth of expertise, which again, I think the chair of community economic development, the chair of public works do have expertise on, and it might be valuable to strengthen those connections. But again, it's not something that I have a hard and firm. I just think it's something to, potentially consider as this conversation goes along. And I am curious if other members of the committee have a reaction one way or the other. So yeah, I certainly appreciate the thought. I mean, it's clear that you guys have thought through it, and I think there are good arguments in both directions.
Cool. Thank you, guys. Any other comments? Again, this is just kind of a presentation to bring everybody up to speed, because we had this time and didn't want to, make people feel a little bit less attached to this ordinance as we work through it. Josh and I probably have a couple of more conversations, like we said, with departments, and then with any luck, what our hope is to get this to you. Well, I think our next meeting is on September 17th, right, Brian? So we'd love to get it to you guys
Yes.
like the Thursday before, or Wednesday before the 17th, so that you get a chance to read it. And then our usual habit is to call all the different committee members and take like any of the fine tuning comments, but sometimes it's hard to draft on TV.
Lisa, just to, if you guys are done here, let me know when you guys are done. I just want to circle back to something.
Okay, I think we're pretty much done. So what would you have there, Brian?
Sure. So just going back to the legal notice of public hearing real quick. We
Yes.
talked about the minor change that we're making tonight. There
yeah.
were, thank you, Ken, for raising this issue.
I'm sorry.
Hello?
Yeah, no, it's Josh is somebody in his background.
Okay. Yeah, so again, we went over the minor issue that we're amending tonight on the fly, so that Diana Palladino could be appointed following the approval of this. As you can see, within this ordinance, there are some red line changes. Again, Board of Education districts in 925B. That's an extremely minor change. In 927, there were some changes that were made to make clear the process by which the officers or the members of this committee are appointed, and how chairs and vice chairs must be appointed. Importantly, the revisions to this ordinance allow for 120 days for the report to be completed and to be submitted, which gives this committee additional time with Diana Palladino's assistance and input. And again, as you can see, that pushes it out from September 9 to October 9. So again, beside the change that we went over already, I believe my understanding was this ordinance committee was approving not only that minor change, but all the other changes that had been previously discussed at the August meeting,
Yes.
and that you can see as red line changes here to allow Diana Palladino to be appointed and to participate, one, and to allow this committee to have more time in which to complete their report. And as you can see here in the yellow, detail out the provisions of how they get appointed and what positions of power must exist within this committee. So I just wanted to make clear that those were also changes that were being voted on by this committee this evening to send to Common Council on September 10th. Thank you, Ken, for
Just
raising
to make
that.
it even more clear, we voted on that at the last hearing, but that's what we voted on all of those changes to be sent to public hearing at this meeting. So I don't want anybody to
Correct.
think those were all the other changes that were made. So it's probably for Ken's benefit that we're going over those again, because we had already
Yes.
voted, we'd already seen those and voted on those and approved those
Mhm.
to go to public hearing today. So I just want the record to be really clear that we didn't make all those changes tonight. The only tiny little
Correct.
change we made was that, that the president could make a designation to make this work, just better language on that. But everything else that
Right, and-
Brian over, we
Yeah.
already saw.
No, and I just want everyone who's watching this to know that the ordinance committee was voting not only the minor change that we discussed, but all those prior changes that basically give this committee more time and spell out the process by which they get appointed and by what positions have to be selected after their appointments.
Great. Jalen, do you have a question?
Yes, and sorry if because I wasn't at the last meeting. But how does that affect the timeline? Because I know we were trying to get this done by next year. But how
Yeah.
does this, giving them more time, like does that affect like when this goes into effect?
It's not going to
No.
affect the end date. We built in time to get this done. Right now, if this gets approved by the committee tonight and gets sent, well, it was approved by the committee
was
tonight, and it's
approved.
going to be, yeah, it was approved. It's going to go to Common Council on September 10th. If that gets approved by the Common Council, it gives this committee until October 9th, 120 days until October 9th to get this done. And then the Common Council has 45 days to consider this. And those 45 days bring it out to November 23rd. The deadline that we were looking at was sometime in March because that's when the primary season starts. So we're talking about somewhere between 3.5 and 4 months, probably closer to 3.5 months of a buffer zone that we have to get this approved by the Common Council, approved by the committee, then approved by the Common Council, and then to set it up so that the state can receive the information prior to the primary season in March.
So we're pushing it
Thank
back a little bit, but we're not in danger of not having this done by primaries. And
Okay.
Nora has a comment to make.
And just to very quickly verify, this was confirmed with the Secretary of State's office. This was run by the registrar who's currently participating. So
It's all good.
Anyway, I just
So,
wanted to make that clear
Jalen,
for the
thank you for
record
the-
so that everyone was aware of what was
Thanks,
going
Ryan.
on and what's going to be voted on Tuesday.
Yeah, and Jalen, thank you for making sure that everybody knows that we're still in
Yep.
good shape. So with that said, I know that some people have public works, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn so people can get to their next meeting. Thank you, Josh. All in favor of adjourning?
Happy Labor Day, everybody.
I think we have enough. Yes. Welcome to fall. Alrighty.
Yep.
Thanks everybody for making time for this special meeting so we can get this reapportionment to council next week. All
Bye-bye.
right. See you later. Thank you.